I'm Euro.
I'm Chris.
And this is Fork Bomb. Wednesday, September 6th, 2017, episode 16, Tech Documentaries.
Where's Eric, you ask? Well, Eric is currently preparing for the Hurricane Irma that's coming at us. That's why he's not here right now. But he'll be back next episode.
Yep, Hurricane Irma, it's on its way. I live in the south of Florida, and so we're putting sandbags around our house, or at least the back of the house where it tends to flood more, and putting up the hurricane shutters and everything. So I've been busy doing that and moving stuff inside, making sure there's no debris that could fly around like a projectile. So yeah, we've been busy doing that. So, but the good thing is that I still had some time to watch some of the documentaries. So I don't have that much to pick up, so that's why I had enough time.
I live in an apartment, and I'm going to go to my parents' in Summerfield, where they have a water pump and generator and can live off the grid for a little while if they need to. So I'm going to take advantage of their preparedness and not do any of my own.
Do they also have a bunker?
This is exciting. This is our first podcast where we have a topic that was submitted to us as feedback, as a suggestion. And we were more than happy to do it, and it was really fun. So wanted to say thank you to Jamie Bainbridge, who suggested on our Facebook page that we do an episode about our favorite retro computing documentaries. The suggestions were Cringely's Triumph of the Nerds, Code Rush, Revolution OS, The Internet's Own Boy, as well as some fictional stuff. We didn't get all of that, but we did get a few. We had fun making it, and as I always tell you, Euro, I'm mainly in this just as a creative outlet for us. It was certainly nice to have the feedback, so Jamie, this one is for you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jamie. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate all the comments. We've been busy watching documentaries and things like that. We did get a chance to watch a few, some together, some not together, but overall we had a great experience just watching them. I had seen some of them already. Actually, we both had seen. Chris, I know you and I had seen Triumph of the Nerds, hosted by Bob Cringely. We'd seen that back in college, so we didn't really watch it again.
I watched it again last week.
Oh, did you?
Yep.
Oh, that's great. Okay. All right. Well, so Bob Cringely actually made another documentary called Nerds 2.0.1. And that one has a lot to deal with the internet and the rise of the internet during that time. I know Triumph of the Nerds was more focused on just the beginnings of the computer industry, and kind of it went all the way to about the mid-90s. And so this one kind of picked up from there, and it takes you to that early internet phase that we had. So it's another great documentary. It's another 3-parter, and I recommend it to anybody. So I'm sure we'll have it in our show notes. There's some the links are the videos available on YouTube. So the all 3 parts, which is actually where we watched all of our documentaries. So at least I did. So big thanks to YouTube too for providing it.
Do you know which companies Nerds 2.0.1 covered?
I don't know for sure. I don't remember. It's been a while. I wanted to say Netscape, but I think I'm getting that confused with Code Rush, which was another documentary that Jamie had suggested, which we did watch. But I don't remember. I'd have to go back and check. I remember it being 3 parts. It was quite long, and they discussed a lot of different topics, like the search engine craze. You remember Alta Vista and Lycos, Hotbot, Excite, Yahoo, everybody. Back then, everybody seemed to have some sort of search page, which actually I want to ask, which one did you use the most back then, Chris?
I think Lycos mostly.
Lycos? Okay.
I think I
Done
went
with the dogs.
Lycos and then maybe Dogpile briefly and then went straight to Google.
Okay. I actually didn't know about Google until about 1999, 2000-ish, when I went to my high school's media center, and all their computers were set up to go to Google. They had Google as their homepage, and that was the first time I ever tried Google as a search engine. Well, I guess that's all it was back then. Tried it. I saw that the results closely matched to what I was looking for, and that's it. That's all I needed. And, well, even to the day, it's still my homepage. Mostly because I just forget to set another homepage. But I like it. I do use it quite a bit. But before Google, I was using AltaVista a lot. And that seemed to be pretty relevant, although not as relevant as Google. And before AltaVista, I was using Yahoo a lot. So those were my three main search pages, and I actually went from one to another. I wasn't using both at the same time or anything like that. I would just, as soon as I found a search engine that would show me more relevant results, I would just completely move on to that one and leave the other one behind. So the great thing about it is that about having some of these search pages, especially the Yahoo, and that was my first search engine, like I had mentioned, is that I actually still use my Yahoo ID from way back when. So my last, and this is back then when it was really cool to put numbers at the end of your username. So my username had a 16 at the end because I was 16 at the time when I was using that user ID, and I still have it today, and well, it still has that 16 on it. So yeah, that was something. And then I created another username. This one, it was mostly because I had seen the movie Hackers, and I thought it was so cool. So I had chosen the username, which I don't even use it anymore, so I can't even remember the password. But it was something like chaos with like a 0, 1001, something like that. It just reminded me of that movie, and people having crazy user IDs, usernames like Acid Cool. So anyway, I know we're deviating off topic, but it's fun to talk about this stuff.
I can only imagine how much unfiltered spam you have in those Yahoo accounts.
Tons. Yes, actually they got better later on with their junk filters. But back then, yeah, it was just every other day you had to go in there, pick them off, and then delete them. That was just a thing, and especially since back then you didn't get that much space.
So we were on Nerds 2.0.1, and talking about search engines is what got us here. I didn't see that one. I'm definitely gonna have to watch it though. It only seems fitting since Crinsley said he would see us again in 10 years, but then came back very much sooner than that for another documentary. You want to do Code Rush or the original Triumph of the Nerds?
Well, I was just thinking maybe Bob Crinsley has a different way of telling time than we do, or he lives in another planet where time goes by faster, like in that Voyager episode. Anyway, yeah, after that not after that, but we did end up watching Code Rush. We didn't watch that one together, but I think you watched your Code Rush after, like a day after I did.
I watched it. I just finished watching it about 30 to 45 minutes ago. Since it was only an hour, I came home after work and watched it, and I think it was my favorite of the documentaries that I watched.
Oh yeah, even more than Triumph of the Nerds?
I'd say it's on par. Triumph of the Nerds was fun, but it's long. Code Rush was like a nice, short little jaunt, and then it was done. And I really enjoyed it. I like how it discussed the history of how Netscape open sourced their code, how they took a go at making a business out of having open source software, how they ultimately failed at it, unfortunately, but I'm glad that they did it because it went on to become what we now know as Firefox. And while they didn't cover that part, that's what happened to Mozilla. I also had a lot of fun watching everyone's screens because they were all using Linux or Unix of some sort. There was one where one guy was working on an IRIX workstation, and I just found that whole history really fascinating. And there were some really profound parts. If you don't mind, I would like to play a brief moment from it.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're at the beginning of an industry, and who knows where that industry is going to go. This could all turn into television again. It could be controlled by a small number of companies who decide what we see and hear, and there's a lot of precedent for that.
See, that was Jamie Zawinski, and he featured prominently in Code Rush, along with contributing to Mozilla. He also contributed to other free software projects like Emacs, and he is currently the maintainer for X Screensaver, which is a screen breaking software for Unix and Linux, which I still use to this day. But I just found it kind of prophetic that he was saying this is an interesting industry, and sure, it's diverse now, but it could soon be controlled just by a few large entities like television is, and I think he was right.
Yeah, I mean, during that time, Microsoft already had Internet Explorer, and they were well on their way in Internet Explorer. So I believe they were in version 3 or 4 when the documentary was made. That's one big entity, and that still controls Internet Explorer today, and the Edge browser. And then we have Google with their Google Chrome browser. I am not quite sure who actually supports Firefox. Is it the Mozilla Foundation?
Yep.
Okay.
But it's not just browsers. It's ISPs. It's
right.
Online shopping. It's how we interact with each other. It's where we get our mobile phones and mobile phone operating systems from. It's all just a few key players.
He's the guy with the blue hair, right? I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, that was great. I saw him in one scene. He had a trench coat on and the boots, and I'm like, yeah, that's cool. This guy did all that before The Matrix came out and made it even more popular.
Of course, when he said that quote, I think he ditched the blue hair.
Right. Yeah, that's near the end of the documentary.
Yeah, but yeah, I found that part particularly dead on and prophetic.
I love how these guys they go out of their way, they give up a large part of their lives to build this stuff, you know. It's just great. It's that hard work, that dedication, you know. It's almost like they build a family within the company, and they treat each other as such. That's just something that's really neat, and I someday I'd like to have that kind of feeling too, you know, either through friends or coworkers and things like that. But yeah, I just I love that, and you can see that everybody worked really, really hard to get the code out there, and if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have Firefox, and lots of people use Firefox today. And
it's not just Firefox, it's what Firefox represented back then and what Mozilla represented back then. Open web standards. I mean, back then there were so many just IE specific things that you had to do when you were a web developer, and they really pushed hard for making the web much more standards based. And without them, while Firefox no longer has the market share that they used to, we still owe a lot of how the web is now to them.
Yes. And actually, I was exclusively using Firefox back then. I remember not even bothering with Internet Explorer. As soon as Firefox came out, I was using it. Before that, I was using Mozilla. And before that, I was using Netscape. So I was all about using alternative browsers rather than Internet Explorer. So in that documentary, we got to see a key player, Mark Andreessen. He was in it very little, but but I had seen him before in other documentaries, and I had read about him. One of the co-founders of Netscape, and just to see, to me, he's like a living legend, in the computer world. So, him's not as known, of course, but still he was important. Probably not as influential as Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Wozniak, but still, I think he was quite important. Well, after that, one documentary that we did watch together was Revolution OS, which Jamie had mentioned as well. What did you think of that documentary, Chris?
I was disappointed. I was especially disappointed because I've put so much time and effort and devotion towards open source software and making my living with open source software. I mean, I live and breathe Linux, and I make my money using Linux and supporting Linux. And I think that the history itself is rich, but the attempt at making a documentary about it was very poorly executed. I did not find it, I don't know. I think it was honestly that documentary was a disservice to the open source movement with how they portrayed everything. I think anyone who knew nothing about Linux and open source software, if they watched it, they would come away from it. If they didn't have any opinion, they might walk away from it with a negative opinion.
I have to agree with you. It wasn't my favorite documentary. It was probably my least favorite. It was very I don't know if dry is the right word for it, but it was quite boring actually for me. I was hoping to see some great facts about Linux, maybe showing some of the earlier versions, showing the prototype, the beta stages of Linux before the kernel, before it actually went off to version 1.0, and just the various stages. And I wanted to know more about the various components that got added on to the kernel, and maybe Linus speak a little bit more towards that and his early experience and his challenges on getting this kernel out. And it wasn't really like that at all. They focused a lot on licensing and open source, just open source and free software. So they focused too much on that. I wanted to know more about the tech details behind the operating system. And instead, I felt like I was just watching legalese. So that was my gripe. I didn't learn much about Linux at all.
Well, I guess that was a hard one, though, because if they got too technical, it would just go over people's heads. I mean, if they just started spouting off all the nitty-gritty bits about how the kernel works, that would put me to sleep, too. And really, what did come out of it is the open source movement, which central to that is the GNU public license, and that is a bunch of legalese, and that is created to maintain Stallman's 4 definitions of freedom when it comes to software. So maybe it's not that it was poorly executed, maybe it's just that as beneficial and influential as that was, it's much more interesting when you're in the middle of it than when you're watching a documentary about it. And maybe there's just not a way to make an engaging documentary about it. Maybe just that history doesn't lend itself to an engaging, enthralling story like Code Rush was, or Triumph of the Nerds was.
But I still wanted to learn more about Linux itself. I didn't really get a chance to learn much of anything, and I feel like when I'm watching a documentary, I want to learn. If it has a name, a title like Revolution OS,
yeah, I'm
thinking, oh boy, Linux, yes. I don't know much about it. I want to learn.
Yeah, you're
right.
Tell
me the history. Tell me the challenges. Things like that.
They did leave out a lot. Like they left out that Linus wanted to. The inspiration for Linux was an operating system called Minix. Was kind of what he used as a model. And they could have at least read off some of that initial, I forget if it was an email or a message group posting where he announced, hey, I have this thing and come and help out with it. And they featured the free software song way too prominently. I don't care how you cover that song. It is just a bad song. Just such a bad song.
I didn't know that was a real thing.
I think the most enjoyable thing that I got out of it was making fun of Eric S. Raymond's mustache.
Yeah, it was hard to ignore.
And Eric S. Raymond, if somehow you ever do happen to listen to this podcast, I'm sorry, and I acknowledge your contributions to the open source community. I just couldn't look away from your mustache.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
It would have been great if you would have just kind of shaved it off for the documentary, but no problem. Just saying. You're still awesome in our book.
Definitely.
So yeah, that takes us actually to our last documentary. And like I said earlier, we watched it a long time ago, back when we were in college, and Chris watched it last week. I had also seen it when I was much younger. I believe I was in middle school, because the documentary is pretty old, and I'm kind of old. So Triumph of the Nerds was hosted by Bob Crinchley, whom is an excellent host. He actually he's been in the industry for quite a long time. I believe he may have started off somewhere in the 70s. That I'm not 100% sure on. But what I do know is that the documentary itself kind of walks you through the history. It goes from the early beginnings of computers to kind of what made that revolution happen, that for home PCs, home computers. He walks you through the Apple II years, and then Microsoft's rise and IBM's interest. So then they released their PC version, the XT, and the PC. I don't know if they went over the PC Junior actually, but definitely their first PC. And then they go over a few other companies. They talk about a few other companies, and then the release of Windows. And then finally, with Windows 95, they have various hosts, various, what do you call that, Chris? When somebody's in the guest host. They had various guest hosts in the show, like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and a few others. So pretty famous people in the industry. And it's just great to watch. It has a really good momentum. It keeps you interested. It keeps you engaged. Bob Crinchley will talk about his personal experience in the industry and while that revolution was going on. So it's one of those documentaries I highly recommend to anybody even remotely interested in computers.
Yeah, it starts way back at the Altair, and yeah, it goes straight up to the late 90s. And they have so much time with so many influential people, like you said. Among those, in addition to who you mentioned, were Steve Wozniak, Gary Kildall, Gordon Moore was in there, of Moore's Law from Intel.
Oh, right, from Intel.
Larry Ellison. Oh, and Larry Ellison said something that I really agree with, and while I really don't like Oracle or get the point of their existence, and honestly really dislike them for messing up everything that was good about Sun after they bought them, he did say one thing that I highly agree with, and this was when the internet first started taking off. He said, I'm going to paraphrase, and keep in mind this was back in the 90s, when he still bought software in boxes. Currently, people make software and it's just bits, and people take those bits and they press them onto a disk, and then they put those bits in a box, and then we drive to the store and we buy those bits in the box, and then we put those bits in our computer off that plastic disk, and it's just stupid. We should just be downloading everything. And of course, his plans was to somehow make Oracle the main way where you download all of your software and really monetize off of that. But with the exception of video games and owning those video games so I can play them later, I really don't like physical media. I really never have. And so now the way that we can just stream things on Netflix or download things legally or illegally. It just makes life so much easier, and he was really on the ball with that idea.
Yeah, that's another one of those prophetic moments that these documentaries have. Is these people that can really see the future. So they're pretty ahead of their time when they say things like that. The good thing is that they're in the industry. They're shaping it, so they can make it happen. So that was pretty neat. And that was probably my favorite documentary out of all of these. Tribe of the Nerds is absolutely a must-watch. Next to Computer Chronicles, of course.
Do you want to talk about Computer Chronicles?
Computer Chronicles.
It's not
sure.
Technically a documentary, but it's a long-running series that does document.
Right. I believe the documentary started in the early 80s. I don't recall the exact year. But and it ended, I think, in 2001, 2002,
Yeah,
something like that. So it's a long running series.
they were on public television, and they chronicled the computing industry and everything that it did. And they weren't afraid to really get into nitty gritty technical details, and they had a lot of influential people on.
A lot of influential people.
And Gary Kildall, who wrote CP/M, the first 8-bit operating system, was the co-host for the longest time.
Right. Yeah. Until sadly he passed away. But yeah, him and Stuart Chaffee did a fantastic job in the show. And I love their demos. They would bring up their machine and then I guess just pray that it worked. I don't know, but everything seemed to work. Okay, let me take that back. Sometimes, most of the time.
In an interview with Leo Laporte on Triangulation, he has Stuart Chaffee on, and he was talking about when they were demoing an Apple laser printer, and it caught on fire.
Yeah, and that was just one of the ones that we know about.
Yeah.
Imagine how many other times things happened. I mean, they were showing off, really cool stuff. I think I think in 85 or 86, when the 386 had just come out, they were talking about it already on the show and demoing it. And then the Pentium and the internet and Windows 95 and then Windows NT and all kinds of stuff. Really, the show is great.
They even had Action Jack on.
Action Jack.
Jack Trammell.
I know you like Action Jack. Yeah. So it was neat. I mean, it's a show that's it's 30 minutes each segment, each show, and at the end they usually ended with the kind of like the news,
Random
that
access.
was relevant to the time. Random access, right? And then we just talk about the latest things going on in the industry. So great show.
I think Random Access was one of my favorite parts too, especially when they would have the top 10 software list for either for the Mac or for the PC, and for maybe 5 years running, After Dark Screensavers was at the top of that list.
Oh, right. After Dark screensaver with the little toaster in the wings.
Yep. I also loved cringing at the exorbitantly high prices of things back then. Like one time they were demoing a find utility for the early Macintosh that would let you find files and search the text within files, because that wasn't built into the operating system. And it cost only $50.
50.
That was in...
Back then money.
Yeah, back then money.
Yeah. Oh, they had some other stuff too. Some of the PCs were running at $3,000-$4,000, and
Oh, yeah.
Early modems, and it was the prices back then. Jeez, in back then money.
And I loved how they would always start the show in the early 80s ones. First, they had wood paneling everywhere. Wood paneling and computerized text. That's how you knew it was high tech. And they would always start off in a dark room where they would just be staring at nothing. And it's like, oh, hello, we've just been sitting here in this dark room doing nothing, just sitting, waiting.
Oh, hello. Hi. Didn't see you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great show. They're all on YouTube as well. I think you just have to search for Computer Chronicles, and there's a channel that you can subscribe to and then watch them all there.
If you want to watch them at the definitive source, you can watch them on archive.org, where Stuart Chaffee himself uploaded them to.
That's even better. I haven't seen any other documentaries recently that had to deal with computers. I'm still looking for some, and I'm gonna go through Jamie's list and maybe watch some other ones. And yeah, because they're all fun, in one way or another.
Definitely, except Revolution OS.
Yeah. Sorry, Jamie. We just didn't really like that one. Okay. Well, I think that's it for this show.
Yep, I guess it's time to go and prep for the hurricane. If we make it to episode number 17, you'll know we survived.
Yeah. Yep. Let's see.
If you would like to leave the podcast any feedback, give us episodes suggestions like Jamie was so kind to do, or would like to correct us on anything, or give us some positive feedback, that would be great too. You can contact us on our Facebook page. Just search for Fork Bomb Podcast, or via Twitter at Fork Bomb Podcast, or you can send us an email to forkbombpodcast@gmail.com.
That's it.
That's it.
Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Thanks again, Euro.
Yep. Thanks, Chris.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
When we have enough free software